much of you, and may the peace of the Holy One be upon you. All right, well, we're going to move now into the first section, which is two of our keynote speakers. We have more to come. And this is going to be partly presentation, partly dialogue, partly small group discussion, and partly question and answer. And probably in that order, but we'll kind of see how it goes. What I'm going to do is introduce them one at a time, and then that way we can have a sense of connecting people well. Our first speaker is going to be Willard Metzger. Now, Willard is General Secretary of the Mennonite Church Canada. He's been a pastor for a couple of decades, and there's a little description of him, so I won't repeat everything that's in your folder. I got to know Willard first when he was actually the Director of Church Relations at World Vision, and when he and Dave Toyson, who is the President and CEO of World Vision, came out to Calgary to do a presentation and actually be in a dialogue with Graham Saul, the Climate Action Network, around climate change as a moral issue. Willard has since now moved to becoming head of the Mennonite Church Canada and has been very involved in certain international development issues for a number of years. When it says that he's traveled over to 50 countries, that's true, because every time I email Willard, he says, well, I just got back from somewhere, and he seems to be always traveling, and I think has a very much on-the-ground understanding of the world's poor, what they're facing, and what people of faith can do to respond to those who are suffering. He's also very interested in the linkages between social justice and environmental justice. In our faith communities, he's one of the national faith leaders who was in at COP17 in South Africa, along with Marty Tyndale and with other world leaders from faith communities, and was involved in certainly speaking to people there, but also had a conversation with our Minister of the Environment, Peter Kent, which he may or may not talk about. Not that I want to put you on the spot, but one fond memory I just want to share is that when Willard was in Ottawa a little more than a year ago, when a number of faith communities came together from a variety of different faith traditions to really focus on climate change, I checked in with Willard and said, are you doing anything for the rest of the day? This was on I think the Wednesday or Tuesday, I can't remember what day it was. And I had a number of meetings set up with MPs, and Willard said, sure, what do you have in mind? And I said, well, would you like to come with me and visit with some MPs? So we spent actually that whole day, I think, visiting with quite a variety, and we tended to focus on the Conservative MPs. We can talk about later why that was the case. But what I came to appreciate about Willard personally was how he very immediately launched into, very much made himself at home in the offices of the MPs, was a gracious host with them and speaking with them, and I think also prophetically challenged them to really look at what are their responsibilities as leaders to deal with the issues around climate change in particular, which is what we were talking about. So I think Willard brings a keen prophetic sensibility, deeply rooted in a spiritual tradition, and we're very privileged, I think, to have him speak as one of our national faith leaders to introduce us to what is effective advocacy. So Willard, come on. And welcome.
Well, it's a great honor to be with you. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time, so I'm just going to launch right into my address. The Christian approach to climate change has often been to develop a theology of the environment, but I'm beginning to realize that creation care is more naturally lodged within a sound theology of worship, because true worship encompasses generosity, restraint, and compassion, These values, I think, are critical to creation care. Indeed, it is their opposites, greed, recklessness, and apathy, that threaten the health of the earth and its inhabitants. And it is people of faith, conditioned and committed to live lives of worship by loving God, Creator, and their neighbor, that are most logically positioned to lead the way in seeking climate justice and creation care. Creation care is a natural outcome of an authentic and sincere desire to worship the divine. Anabaptism, my own family of faith within the Mennonite Christian context, focuses on discipleship and service and has always resisted a one-dimensional understanding of worship. Menno Simons, the founder of my Mennonite tradition, wrote, "True evangelical faith cannot lie dormant. It clothes the naked, it comforts the sorrowful, it shelters the destitute, it serves those that harm it, it binds up that which is wounded." Such an understanding of faithfulness to God will naturally lead us to express commitment to the other. It is an alignment to the directive expressed by Jesus. When asked in Matthew 22, which is the greatest commandment of the law, Jesus replied by saying, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." So friends, I submit to you that if you follow this directive, it will be impossible to ignore the compassionate imperative of creation care. Food security has become a global crisis. According to a recent report by Willie Reimer and Bruce Gunther of Mennonite Central Committee, every night 1 billion people, 1/6 of the world's population, goes to bed hungry. The growth of global undernourishment can be largely attributed to the increasing number of people affected by environmental disasters such as drought, flooding, and storm surges. An estimated 250 million people are affected by climate-related hazards in a typical year, according to Reimer and Gunther. And that is projected to grow by 50% to an estimated 375 million people a year by 2015. 2015. With rising sea levels, expanding deserts, and violent storms becoming stronger and more frequent, World Vision has concluded that climate change has the potential to undo the last 50 years of work that international humanitarian organizations have helped to achieve. Friends, we simply cannot claim to worship the one who instructed us to love God and our neighbor with all our beings and ignore these dynamics. If there is even a chance that our Canadian lifestyle and consumption patterns contribute to the suffering of global neighbors, our adulation and reverence to the divine will compel us to seek correction and express compassion. So creation care is neighbor care. Climate justice is standing in solidarity with the poor and disadvantaged. Consumption patterns must be evaluated. The developed world, countries of the world, hold 25% of the world's population, but consume 75% of all energy, 85% of all wood products, and 72% of all steel produced. Canadians are consuming at a pace that is 2.5 times greater than the average global citizen. This is the time for faith communities across Canada to consolidate their voice and advocate for stronger government response to caring for our creation. As an expression of our worship and in solidarity with our global community, such advocacy is a spiritual exercise. Faith-based advocacy, I think, therefore has a unique platform. Firstly, faith-based advocacy speaks with authority. People may choose to debate the authority and accuracy of climate science, but a faith-based advocacy stands on a moral platform. Whether the developed world acknowledges the effect of climate change or not, we have no other option but to take responsibility for our consumption patterns. With the increasing strain on natural resources, everyone must accept responsibility for individual and corporate consumption practices. The globe is able to provide enough food, clean water, and clean air for all of its inhabitants. for any people group, faith community, religious structure, political power, or geographical entity to sanction the use of more than its fair share becomes a moral and ethical failure. To ignore such a reality of disparity is a moral and ethical violation. In an interconnected global community, injustice for one becomes injustice for all. The health of the globe itself will determine our compliance to the shared moral obligation. Secondly, faith-based advocacy speaks with hope. It is easy to fall into despondency, despair, and cynicism when responding to climate change. This is understandable, but it is also, in a sense, the easy option. Many people go straight from denial to despair, and interestingly, both positions lead to apathy where little is demanded of us. Denial says nothing needs to be done. Despair says nothing can be done. But between denial and despair, there is hope. As people of faith, we must choose to hope. Denial is no longer intellectually defensible, and things are too dire for despair. We must choose to hope, because when we hope, we look for solutions. When we hope, we don't give up. When we hope, we choose to believe that a different path is possible, and we start to explore that path. As faith communities, we can contribute to some necessary correction. Together, we can help develop an environment of hope by fostering a posture of gratitude. As global inhabitants, we have taken the earth for granted. We have assumed that it will always be here and it will always be able to produce that which is needed to sustain us. However, reckless abandonment of our responsibility to care for the earth has put the health of the earth in great risk. A renewed posture of gratitude for the earth will generate a sense of responsibility for its health. If it is true that we exploit what we value, but we defend what we love, then what better way to generate a renewed love for the earth than by strengthening a sense of gratitude for the earth? This is a particular responsibility for faith communities. We must find ways of fast-tracking a spirit of thankfulness for the earth if we want to generate advocacy action in support of the earth. Faith communities can cooperate in increasing public awareness. We can cooperate in educating the public to our global responsibilities. We can celebrate and highlight the many greening and environmental sustainable initiatives of groups and individuals. Together, as a moral imperative to care for the poor and disadvantaged, we can work to mainstream concern for our environment and responsibility for individual consumption practices. Now, having said all this, I recognize that the inconsistencies that we have displayed as national faith leaders in seriously engaging the threat of climate change. At COP15 in Copenhagen, there was only one Canadian faith leader present. At COP17 in Durban, South Africa, there were two. I was one of them. And at COP18 in Doha, shortly, there will be none. Although thanks to cooperation with the United Church of Canada and our sisters and brothers in Latin America, we will be represented by a sister from El Salvador. Yesterday, at the governing board of the Canadian Council of Churches, I requested that they seek an official observer status so that we can promote and assure the presence of Canadian church leaders at future COP events. And I've been assured that this will be pursued. Efforts have been made. The Commission on Peace and Justice of the Canadian Council of Churches has determined climate change as a priority in the next triennium of their work. The representative of 20 different church houses was unanimous on this decision, so I'm thankful for that. And a letter has been sent by the Canadian Council of Churches to Minister Kent requesting that Canada take collective action by signing and implementing a binding international agreement that commits nations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and set fair and clear targets to ensure that global average temperatures stay below a 2 degrees Celsius increase from pre-industrial levels. It also asks Canada to demonstrate national responsibility by committing to national GHG emission targets and a national renewable energy policy designed to achieve sustainability. And thirdly, it asks Canada to implement climate justice by playing a constructive role in the design of the Green Climate Fund under United Nations governance, and by contributing public funds to assist the poorest and most affected countries to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change. So I'm thankful for that. There are efforts. However, Mishka Lysek, who you know from the University of Calgary, a tireless advocate for creation care, has rightly assessed in an upcoming publication. He writes, "There is no strategic action plan with realistic objectives, no communication strategy, and no discussion of an educational program and infrastructure to educate and support faith members to advocate for their MPs, MPPs, or MLAs." He writes, "There is little coordination of efforts, only fragmented and partial plans to more deeply engage the faith communities themselves through education and worship. Little or no outreach to significant allies and potential partners, and no plan to develop financial or organizational capacity to continue the movement forward. There is no effective network to foster communication and coordination between partners, no body to coordinate or monitor progress to achieving targets and goals, and no backbone organization to coordinate and drive these actions forward in an effective and strategic manner. As the building blocks of any effective campaign, all of these elements will be required if the faith communities are to act effectively on climate change." And Mishka, "I recognize and acknowledge this failure. As a faith leader, I have applied some energy in trying to engage my community, but it has not been enough. Quite frankly, I invite and I need members of my faith community to help elevate the concern." At COP17 in Durban, South Africa, Marty Tyndall, moderator of United Church, and Joy Kennedy and I, we were given an audience with Peter Kent, our Minister of Environment. We asked what we might do as faith leaders to help Canada become a leader in addressing climate change. As expected, Minister Kent told us how Canada was being a leader by pulling out of the Kyoto Protocol, and then he went on to say how we can help communicate what is being done to our constituencies. But then he followed up with a comment that I have not been able to shake. He said, "Our Canadian press has been downsized considerably. They no longer have the capacity to generate a lot of news stories. They are forced to take what is easy." And then he said the Canadian public is more concerned about the trial of Michael Jackson's doctor than they are about climate change. At first, I disregarded this comment, but have since been haunted by it. I think there is probably more truth to the statement than I would like to believe. When I share my assessment of Minister Kent's comments to others, which I'm about to do, I'm often mocked as naive, so you can do the same. Perhaps I am. But when focused on passionate about a concern that is so urgent, it is easy to view an inactive government as refusing to listen to the people. Admittedly, leadership should have enough fortitude to do the right thing without the security of public opinion, but few political systems will do this. Perhaps we are disillusioned when thinking that the majority of the Canadian public is concerned about climate change. Be not fooled. Our government is very aware of public opinion. In fact, despite what I may say, or how forceful I may say it, the Canadian government is more aware of the opinions of my faith constituency than I am. I think our greatest challenge is determining how we make creation care and climate change such a grassroots mass movement concern that no government or political system would be foolish enough to ignore it. This is our challenge. This is our call to action as faith communities. People are quicker to turn away from negative messages. So can we better fast-track an embrace of responsibility within our communities of faith by making environmental concern a positive, celebrative, and worshipful response? This is not to deny the dire need we are in. Rather, it is to consider the need for response so great that we must make it as palatable as possible. This is why I have tried to frame creation care and climate justice within the framework of worship. Because we love God, we will love our neighbor. Because we love God, we will grow in our restraint. Because we love God, we will evaluate our purchases. We will question our consumption. Because we love God, we will challenge global systems that encourage and perpetuate consumption. Because we love God, we will exercise our voice in solidarity with those suffering from environmental disasters. Because we love God, we will insist that our governments become more responsible. We will seek creative and celebrative ways to engage as many people as possible to embrace and express a concern for this earth. We will invite them to worship God with us by preserving and protecting the earth and all of its inhabitants. As people of faith, this is our worship. This is our praise to the Creator. And if our response to this journey is held in worship, it will be life-giving to us and to others. May Creator God, so full of grace, joy, and compassion, guide us all in a serious embrace of worship. Thank you.
Thank you.